For today's video, I want to go over some commonly recommended beginner fish that might actually be worth avoiding for your very first aquarium. Unfortunately, due to their popularity, some very popular species in the hobby have been inbred for generations to meet demand, and that's taken its toll on their hardiness. While the featured fish in the video may have been great options for beginners a few years or even decades ago, these days they can be surprisingly weak, and I will recommend other alternatives as we work through the video. As usual, I have an accompanying blog post that I link to in the description with all of my sources. So first up is the trusty guppy, which is easily one of the top 3 most popular tropical fish in the hobby and one of my personal favourites. But they also happen to be the fish that I've also had the highest loss rate with. Unfortunately, you'll notice a theme in this video where the more popular a species is, the more health issues it tends to have. Thankfully, guppies have been the subject of quite a bit of research to prove this point. A Japanese research team took 3 groups of guppies, 2 which were line-bred fancy strains and had been inbred for generations, and 1 feral population collected from a local stream in Japan. Since guppies are native to South America and the Caribbean, the feral population over in Japan must have originally descended from domesticated fish. But the researchers found that when they inbred the feral guppies, their survival rate dropped down from 88.1% to 70.7% in just 1 generation. Now keep in mind, most fancy guppy strains in the hobby today have been inbred for years, if not decades, so take that and compound it all down, and then you start to realise why a lot of modern guppy lines are very hard to keep alive. But that same study also noted that crossing the feral guppies with the line-bred guppies significantly improved survival rates due to the increased genetic diversity, but unfortunately it doesn't give any percentages for that side of the test. Another study out of the UK tested guppies under parasite stress. This one also looked at 3 groups of guppies, 1 which would be inbred with the siblings and parents, 1 which was outbred, and the control group. When exposed to a naturally occurring parasite that shares the same native areas of guppies and they've evolved with, 54% of the control guppies were able to clear the infection by themselves. 43% of the outbred guppies were also able to clear it without issue, but only 11% of the inbred guppies were able to recover. And that level of inbreeding for that specific test was done over 4 generations, which can easily happen in less than a year with guppies, sometimes less than 6 months depending on exactly what's happening. So again, when you think of how long fancy guppies have been line-bred over and over and over again, it does start to become really clear why modern guppies are so fragile. And while I do enjoy watching my guppies because they are so active and colourful, I am starting to rethink how I want to approach guppies moving forward. Personally, I really like what Smaller Fish is doing over on TikTok, and I link to his account in the description. He runs similar tanks to mine, which are natural, filterless, Wallstad style tanks, but instead of focusing on fancy guppies, he keeps wild types. They are far less colourful, but they also seem to be far hardier than mine. I have seen some people try to get line-bred groups of guppies and then mix them all into 1 tank to try and increase the hardiness of the fish and increase genetic diversity, so that is one path to go down to try and avoid the more fragile fish. Another option is introducing Endler's livebearers. Now there is still some debate in the scientific community about whether Endlers are a distinct species or just a variety of guppy, but either way they are closely related and they can interbreed. So this gives us another 2 alternatives. We can keep either pure Endlers like my black bar Endlers in this tank, which in my experience are very hardy, or we can keep the Endler guppy hybrids like my Japan blue Endlers in this tank. Now I haven't had my Japan blue Endler guppy hybrids that long, maybe around a month at the time of recording, but the idea is you're taking 2 distinct populations and crossbreeding them, but again, too much of that is going to start to cause problems with inbreeding. Moving away from livebearers, and another great alternative to guppies are Medaka rice fish. I'm a massive fan of these, and I honestly would be happy just having tanks and tanks with different lines of Medaka ricefish and Neocaridina shrimp in them. There's over 450 varieties of Medaka ricefish available over in Asia these days, and more of them are making their way over to the West every year. Now you might assume that with so many strains being available, Medaka ricefish have also suffered the same problems as guppies, but one research paper did note that Medaka have an unusually high tolerance to inbreeding. While that study didn't measure any exact factors such as lifespan, resistance to disease, or survivability or anything like that, in my personal experience, Medaka ricefish are definitely tougher than guppies, as well as Endlers and hybrids. That's why moving forward I honestly would be happy just getting more Medaka lines for my different tanks. They are very hardy in my experience, very easy to keep, and one of the biggest selling points for Medaka over guppies right now is that they don't actually need a heater in the tank, which saves money with energy prices being so high. So moving on, and I want to talk about neon tetras, which are another one of the top 3 most popular tropical fish in the hobby, and here in the UK they are the most tropical fish sold each year. Unfortunately though, just like guppies, their popularity has also become their biggest weakness. Neon tetras are bred in unbelievable numbers in fish farms, often with no regard at all for maintaining genetic diversity or health. While one study from an Indonesian research paper did point out that inbreeding is a growing problem for the survival rate of neon tetras, they didn't provide any specific figures. On top of any genetic issues due to inbreeding, you also have the risks of neon tetra disease and false neon tetra disease, which can both cause significant losses if you get them. I do keep a group of neon tetras in my 40-gallon tank, and while my survival rate hasn't been that bad, I have heard some nightmare stories of people losing all of their neon tetras within weeks of purchasing them. Sadly, because almost all neon tetras available in the hobby today are captive bred, these problems are only going to increase unless breeding practices change, which personally I don't think they're going to. But the good news is that there's a fantastic alternative, the cardinal tetra, which I also keep in my 40-gallon alongside my neons. At first glance they may look almost identical, but there is one clear difference if you focus on their stomachs, because neons have a white stomach, while with the cardinal tetras the red expands all the way across their belly. While their care needs and behaviour are similar, in my experience their hardiness definitely isn't. Cardinal tetras are generally far tougher fish, usually because they are apparently difficult to breed in captivity, so the vast majority of cardinal tetras in the hobby are still wild caught. Not only should there be more genetic diversity with these wild caught fish, but predators and disease and things like that will also remove the weaker fish out of the bloodline, keeping them as hardy as possible. Now I know that some people are against keeping wild caught fish, but in this specific case I really see no problem with it. Tank Tested have a great little mini documentary on their channel, which I link to in the description, where a film crew followed a mother and daughter team who catch wild cardinal tetras for a living. It's nothing like I expected, if I'm honest. They use a paddle-powered boat to navigate flooded forests during the wet season, and instead of using large commercial nets that'll get torn on the flooded forest trees, they use hand-operated nets. The smaller nets reduce the chance of damage from snags on the submerged trees, but it also reduces the bycatch because it allows them to specifically target the cardinal tetras. On top of that, some sources also suggest that it's basically impossible to overfish cardinal tetras since their populations explode by millions every wet season, so they are more of a sustainable wild-caught option. In my personal experience and the experience of my friends who've kept both, cardinal tetras are definitely the hardier species when compared to neons, but I have had people comment on my video saying the opposite has been true for them. Moving forward, I have been planning a 54 litre or 14 US gallon tank that I was originally thinking of putting neon tetras into, but now I am starting to lean more towards cardinal tetras just because I think there'll be a higher survivability rate with them. Next up are betterfish, which are one of my favourite species in the hobby by far. While they may not be a top selling fish in terms of numbers sold, I am confident in saying that they are among the most popular in the hobby. That's because with species like guppies or tetras, people will usually buy them in groups, but with bettas, most people will buy one due to their territorial nature. As much as I love betta fish, I've had a rough time with bettas in the hobby, and I don't plan on keeping them again anytime soon, if ever, if I'm honest. Just like the other species that I've mentioned, years of mass inbreeding have taken their toll on the species and survival rates are plummeting. For example, I lost my newest betta within 6 weeks of getting them, and my other betta fish, Marmalade, did develop a tumour a few months back which didn't seem to be that much of an issue, but within the last few days at the time of recording, she's also started pine coning. That means that her body is starting to swell up in size and her scales are starting to point away from her body. Even though I'm doing 90% daily water changes and treating her with Isha medications, here in the UK, antibiotics for fish are only available with a vet's prescription, and very few vets will actually see fish. I know that I've mentioned this a few times in videos recently, but I will link to a video from Tiff's Fish in the description. To my knowledge, she's the most followed betta fish influencer on both Instagram and TikTok, and in that video I've linked, she explains how she's seen a major decline in the survivability of betta fish over the last few years. On top of that, she also shares some comments from her community in the video backing that up, and then there's comments on the video itself with other people saying they've seen the same. The problem is that large importers don't really seem to care much about fish health, and while the smaller independent breeders may actually produce healthier stock, they have to individually ship the fish to you and drastically increase costs. Because of that, I doubt there's going to be any major improvements in betta fish health anytime soon. I also want to give a quick shout out to Thompson Aquatics over on TikTok for pointing something out that I've never heard before in one of his videos, and I link to that in the description below too. Now, I haven't had a chance to read the full research paper myself yet, but his video is about a research paper showing that female betta fish can be chemically converted into males by exposing them to honey during their larval stage. Since male betta fish typically have a far higher price tag than female betta fish, I wouldn't be surprised if at least some betta fish breeders are using this method to try and maximise profits. Now, I have no evidence of that actually happening, but if it is, it's just another factor working against the overall health and longevity of betta fish. Thankfully, there are some great alternatives to betta fish which are usually easy to find and quite affordable, and personally I'm going to be leaning towards gourami. By chance, honey gourami are my favourite fish in the hobby, and I would love to set up a species specific tank for them probably next year. But I'm also interested in other small gourami species like sparkling gourami, croaking gourami and dwarf gourami. Now, I'm fully aware that dwarf gourami can have issues with endovirus, but given the state of bettas right now, I honestly rather take that risk with a dwarf gourami than get another betta fish. To my knowledge, honey gourami, sparkling gourami and croaking gourami don't have any specific health issues with viruses though. Finally, I want to talk about zebra danios. Now, I might use clips of other fish for this part because I only have 2 of these in my 40-gallon tank and they're often in the plant cover looking for food. While zebra danios have had a reputation for being one of the hardiest fish in the hobby, that does seem to be changing. Tiny Menagerie mentioned this in her zebra danio care guide on her YouTube channel, pointing out that it's not always inbreeding that's the issue, but rather the conditions when it comes to zebra danios. That's because zebra danios will apparently happily spawn in very poor conditions, so breeders are taking advantage of that. So in theory at least, Fry could be battling multiple infections from day one. Here in the UK, that situation gets even worse because zebra danios were added to the controlled species list around 2 years ago now. To be clear, they are not banned, but a lot of suppliers do seem to be struggling to get the right paperwork allowing them to import zebra danios. That's resulted in the only reliable source for zebra danios in my area at least being Pets at Home, which is our big box chain store, and unfortunately it really doesn't have the best reputation. When I wanted some zebra danios for one of my new setups last year, I ended up buying 10 of them from Pets at Home, and within just a couple of weeks only 2 of them were still alive. Outside the UK, the survival rates may be better, but at least in my area, it is clear that zebra danios aren't as hardy as they used to be. Thankfully, there's a few great alternatives on the market, but the most common and affordable one are white cloud mountain minnows. Personally, I keep the golden variety, but I do want to get a group of the regular variety soon too. In my experience, these guys have been very hardy, but they are also widely considered to be one of the hardiest fish in the hobby, and I haven't seen anyone saying they've had any major issues with them either. Another big advantage of these, just like Japanese Medaka rice fish, is that these don't require tropical temperatures either. I keep mine in a room temperature tank without a heater and they don't have issues. So that helps you keep your electricity bills down because you don't need to get a heater to keep these fish happy. Anyway guys, that brings the video to an end. I hope it's been helpful. Thanks for watching and good luck with your aquariums.